Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of In-Depth Angling. Really excited to have you here, and I'm really excited to film this one with you. We're going to be covering over the bass post-spawn phases after they get done spawning on Lake of the Ozarks today. And we're going to jump right into this thing down over here towards the dam. I'm over here. Let me zoom out real quick so you can see where I'm at. I'm going over here by Lake Ozark area, down by Bagnell Dam. This is closer towards the end of the lake here. The dam's actually right over here. This is the Osage River coming down here by that point. We're going to start over here in Duckhead Cove. These bass will be stacked up back in here in these back pockets, and they'll be spawning, and coming out of that they're going to be entering into the post-spawn phase, which starts to happen once water temperature gets up until usually typically like the 70s, but it's really affected more so by moon phases because the bass can spawn at any temperature between like 55 and 80 degrees. When the moon is getting away from being full, you can usually bank on the bass moving out of the backs of the coves from their spawning pockets back out towards the pre-spawn areas, because they use the same areas that they came in when they were in pre-spawn mode and pre-spawn phases. They will exit the same way that they came in. So if you were able to find fish during the pre-spawn months of the year and you were able to find them before they came back into spawning, start by hitting the areas just outside the spawning pockets, and those are going to be your first areas, and you're basically going to start hitting the areas in reverse from what you would as if you were pre-spawn fishing. If you were pre-spawn fishing, you would be hitting these areas out here towards the main lake coming out of winter first, and then working your way back into the cove and following the bass as they move, as opposed to hitting up the back areas over here along these secondary points and old channel creeks towards the backs of the coves, which is where they're going to be ending up starting this process back out. Now, not all the fish spawn at once, so like I said, they can spawn anywhere in that temperature range, really looking at the full moon, and when it starts to go away is usually when this is going to happen. The males stay on the nest for a few days, up to a week, guarding the fry. The females move basically right after the spawn's done. They go up there, they lay their eggs, and they end up moving out. And in this cove here, for example, these fish will hang out up underneath these docks along here on the left side of this cove. They will go ahead and, especially if there's brush piles, they will kind of camp out in those areas during the day, and then they might come along and cruise the banks during the evenings and low light hours looking for food. Usually that's a typical pattern like the Ozarks, is they will kind of be very structure oriented, so you want to be looking for different docks that have brush piles around them. Those fish are kind of beat up after the spawning process, and to go to those areas just kind of rest for a while. And they'll eat, but they can also be put into like a post-spawn funk where they won't really eat and be actively searching for food, so they'll usually have to kind of slow down and fish structure to be able to pull those fish out. You definitely want to be looking for structure along the bank, as well as off of points, drop-offs, and humps offshore. Bass roam in search of food during the low light hours of the early morning and evening. Secondary points are good, especially because they kind of provide like a little bit of a bridge point here between the creek channels, and a lot of bait fish like to hang out over here along these rocky points. And when the lake is actually having a decent amount of current because the Bagnell Dam floodgates are open, or if they're running a lot of turbine generation, the points will actually have a little bit of current out here along the main lake, and there's some big points out here, especially towards the lower end of the lake, that stick out. Like this is Duckhead Point itself here, and it sticks out quite a ways. Kind of a gradual slope in some areas, a little bit harder of a slope in others, but the bait fish kind of get congregated out there when there's some current running, and there's a lot of bass that go out there and feed up on them, as well as other species. But like this point here is really defined and kind of tapers off on the right side over here. But yeah, those fish will kind of set up right along this edge and feed up on those fish. And those are the active ones that you can kind of catch really easy. There's always going to be some inactive ones that are more in a post-spawn funk, so they'll be along the cover and really looking for the brush piles along docks. And good areas to be checking out are typically the docks you'll catch crappie around during the fall and the spring before they go into spawn. Usually that's where the crappie will stack up, is outside the spawning pockets where there's some brush along the docks and old creek channels, and you'll be able to catch the bass there during the summer months. From late spring to early fall, when they are capable of spawning, they will kind of hang out in those areas, and then when they get ready to come back in, or another wave of fish comes back in to spawn again on the next full moon cycle, they'll move back into those same areas, and they will be back right where they were in spawning. And then so there's always going to be some fish through that water temperature range of 55 to 80 degrees that are going to be either in a post-spawn, a pre-spawn phase, or spawning phase, and you can kind of catch them, the post-spawn and pre-spawners, in the same places. But barometric pressure, time of day, weather, boat traffic, and current generated by Bagnell Dam all affect when and where the fish will feed. So the pressure, if they have a big cold front or something, they're going to kind of back off along the channel drop-offs, and they'll go back out towards the points more so, or they'll just kind of bunker down in the brush piles that are a little bit deeper off of those docks. And you're really going to have to work pretty hard to catch those fish. It's kind of a grind when it gets to be like that, but they are catchable. And here's some of the baits I like to use, especially during that time, is these old monsters by Zoom, any really bigger style worm like that Texas rigged. It's kind of a mesmerizing tail action with these baits, these curly tail baits. Drag them through the brush pile, you let them sit there for a couple of seconds, and then you move them again, and just kind of letting it just float back down the bottom, leave it unpegged is what I like to do, and just kind of like let it fall down into the branches, and they'll come and pick that thing up, and you'll be catching quite a few fish with that. Those are the kind of inactive fish, but they can be some of the bigger ones as well. Secondly, we have a Senko, which is also good during the spawn for whenever they're cruising along the banks in search of food, or if the bass are starting to kind of suspend up a little bit more outside the brush piles, or if they're really shallow brush piles, you can pop these over the top of them and catch some of those suspended fish that are in between the branches. They're also really good for skipping underneath docks that have those bass sitting there. You can catch them up underneath the floats a little bit higher in the water column as well. Then we have square bills, which are good for kind of like that transitional period from like early morning to mid-morning, because those bass will kind of leave the shallows up there feeding early in the morning, and these fish will kind of move back in during the evening again. But you can intercept those fish as they're coming and going with these square bills fairly easy, and cover a lot of water and fan cast these down along the bank. Power fish and cover a lot of water to try to find these roaming fish that are in search of food, and you can catch quite a few fish doing that. You can also catch them, this is what I like to use off those points whenever the current's running, is these deep diving crankbaits. It gets down there to where the rocks are. You bang this thing off the rocks, and it makes the bass react to it as it comes by in a kind of an erratic motion, and instinctively to react to your bait and eat it. You'll catch a lot of other fish doing this as well, but this is one of the more productive ways to catch those bass that are on those points. You can use the big long worms like I showed you over here too, and drag them along them, and you can catch some fish doing that as well. But this is one of the better ways to kind of power fish those points and figure out which point the bass are actually set up on more and where the active fish are. You want to definitely be trying to find the more active fish, because the more active they are, the easier they are to catch, and usually the more of them there are in the area. I like using these poppers here whenever the early morning and late evening hours are in and the low light conditions are set in place. The males that'll still be up there guarding the fry won't tolerate these things at all. They'll nail them. The females that are cruising around looking for bait fish will also nail these things. You can use this kind of style of bait with a little bit more action and pop and with noise, as opposed to some of these spooks, but sometimes they go for more of a subtle kind of walking style bait. And I like to use both and kind of experiment with what the fish are going to be into, because some of these fish are more aggressive than others during this time, and it really, like I said, gets affected by the weather and the barometric pressure, especially if it's right after one of the holiday weekends at like the Ozarks, like a Memorial Day or 4th of July or Labor Day, or just a weekend in general where there's a lot of heavy boat traffic. Those fish have seen a lot of different lures from other fishermen coming down, as well as the party boaters that have been out, and it kind of really disturbs the fishing just because of the amount of people that are out there, and it just kind of gets the fish in a weird funk in and of itself. Gliding baits on top of the water, you can walk back and forth, not quite as aggressive, and it might catch you a few more fish than, let's say, the popper will. And sometimes you can pick them off as well with these Senkos a little bit easier if they're up there shallow. But yeah, that's how I catch these fish on Lake of the Ozarks this time of year. Let's move you guys down over here to another section of the lake. This is going to be over here on the Naangwa arm of the lake. So we were just down here by the dam. I'm going to take you over here and show you an area that doesn't have as many points and pockets into it. This is over here by where the little Naangwa feeds into the big. Crossed over here on the right side. We're going in here. There's some bigger condo docks in here. These fish will kind of suspend up along. I'd skip Senkos up underneath of there. Fish along the back sides of these docks and these walkways. And I would also be checking out some of these different little points that are coming off over here. There's a couple of creeks that run right over here along it where it gets a little bit steeper of a drop off. Those fish will be sitting up underneath those docks if there's some brush piles in there. As well as this point that's right out here on the main lake. It kind of tapers off pretty consistently. There's a little fish icon that's already out there on it. That'd be something I would probably go and deep crank or scan over to see if there's some brush piles there. Another example over here on the Osage, this is the Grand Glaze Bridge and Highway 54. Right over here. Some of these areas out here get to have very, very steep drop-offs off of these points. And the fish will get up along here during the times whenever the dam's running current. You can catch them with the deep diving crankbait. Sometimes in the evening and early morning hours, they'll even be busting on bait, and you can use those topwater baits, work them fairly aggressively out there, and you'll catch those bass as well. Like this point here, it's very good. It's got a big long shelf that they can kind of sit up on and chase bait over and come in and out of the deeper water to kind of ambush the fish. The schools of bait fish that are running around over here off of these condo docks as well. Same situation. If you cross the lake over here, same kind of situation with these points. The darker the contours are and the more black that you're seeing there is just indicating a steeper drop, and these are very steep drops. It's like underwater cliffs basically. That's what's going on down here, and the bass really get stacked up along here whenever there's current getting pulled through the dam. I'm going to take you up here one more time onto the Gravway arm. I haven't really hit this too much in any of my breakdowns. Another big long cove on Lake of the Ozarks. He's got a couple different side pockets coming off of here. And those little inside bends that are in here, down here at the bottom of the screen, there's a couple docks that kind of extend out, and those would be good areas to check, especially if there's brush around. As well as over here, same situation, check the docks. Same situation out here, check the docks, and as well as along these points. They're not as crazy as the ones I showed you on the Osage, but they do have a little bit of a steepness to them. And those fish can get stacked up here as well, especially on this point that's right here. It's a very good long tapering point. It kind of has a little bit of a steepness to it and consistency. It's not like a straight sheer cliff, but it's got probably more like a 45-degree angle going down to the lake. Those are good points to be dragging those worms down along, as well as those crankbaits and baiting them down there into those rocks. Those are good situations to be in whenever the current's been running, because this one is especially facing up here, coming down, and that current coming from upstream to the top of your screen would be coming down and hitting right into this point. So another big hump over here, really long. I would expect there to be some good fish along here with the bait being stacked up when there's current being generated. I would be surprised if there weren't brush piles along here put in by other bass anglers and crappie fishermen. So those are all be kind of areas to be scanning over and looking at. You can see there's a little fish icon over here on this one dock. I would click that. Maybe it'll give me something on it. Fishing or diving hotspot. Depth is 13 feet of water. So yeah, I would definitely be checking those kind of situations out. And this is Navionics, and this is free to anybody to use. So if you want to go around and look at some of these other places and check out where some of these other little fishing hotspots are, you can. It's free. There's a little link that's up here. I'll highlight this. That's the website that I'm on. I'm just going over here to Chart Viewer and looking at all this stuff, so it's fairly easy to use. Thank you guys for watching today's video so much. Drop a thumbs up down below if you enjoyed this. Comment what you'd like to see next. We got some other multi-species kind of breakdowns for Lake of the Ozarks coming up within the next month, as well as some more multi-species fishing action that's going to be released during the month of June. And we're going to have some different states involved in that, and we're also going to have the region here in Missouri with Lake of the Ozarks and a surrounding area. So subscribe so you don't miss any of that content, and we'll catch you on the next one.